Sarah Mitchell began her day like any other, until the morning that changed everything. When she stepped out of her car, only to lock eyes with a wild bobcat pacing near the edge of the parking lot. Something in the animal's restless movements made Sarah freeze. What Sarah did next stunned everyone, leading a wild predator straight through the front doors of the facility, past stunned colleagues frozen in doorways, down the sterile hallways where no wild cat should ever walk. Why would a seasoned wildlife expert risk everything to bring a dangerous predator inside? And what could drive a wild bobcat to follow a human into a building against every survival instinct? What happened next would leave a building full of professionals speechless and change how they thought about the bond between the wild and the human forever. Before we start, hit the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. The morning mist hung low over the pine forests of northern Colorado as Sarah Mitchell pulled her weathered Subaru into the gravel parking lot of the Mountain View Wildlife Rehabilitation Center. At 62, she'd been working at the center for nearly 20 years, but the early September morning still took her breath away. The way the golden light filtered through the aspens just beginning their autumn transformation, the crisp mountain air carrying the scent of pine sap and earth. Sarah had arrived earlier than usual that Tuesday morning, unable to shake the restless feeling that had kept her tossing and turning all night. Something about those 2 bobcat kittens they'd taken in 3 days ago had been nagging at her. Found huddled in the center's storage shed, the little ones had somehow squeezed through a gap in the old wooden boards, likely drawn by the smell of the deer feed stored inside. The night security camera had captured their tentative exploration before they'd curled up together behind a stack of supply boxes, where the morning crew discovered them. The kittens, probably around 12 weeks old, were in surprisingly good condition. Well-fed, glossy coats, bright eyes. That should have been Sarah's first clue. Wild bobcat mothers didn't just lose track of healthy kittens, but in the moment, with 2 scared babies mewing in the corner of the shed, the team had made the call to secure them first and ask questions later. As Sarah stepped out of her car, stretching her back after the 40-minute drive from her cabin, she noticed movement near the dumpster at the edge of the parking lot. Living in these mountains for as long as she had, Sarah had developed a 6th sense for wildlife. That particular quality of movement that distinguished a wild creature from wind-blown trash or shadows. She paused, her hand still on the car door, watching. A tawny form emerged from behind the dumpster, and Sarah's breath caught in her throat. A bobcat, female by the size and build. But something was off about her behavior. Instead of melting back into the forest line at the sight of a human, the cat was pacing, her movements agitated and purposeful. She would take a few steps, pause to listen with her distinctive tufted ears swiveling like radar dishes, then lower her nose to the ground, following some invisible trail. Sarah remained perfectly still, her decades of experience telling her this was no ordinary encounter. The bobcat's body language screamed distress. Not aggressive, not defensive, but searching. The cat let out a soft, chirping call, a sound Sarah recognized immediately. It was a mother's call to her young. The realization hit Sarah like a physical blow. The kittens in their quarantine room. This had to be their mother. Moving with deliberate slowness, Sarah reached into her canvas work bag. Her fingers found the soft flannel cloth she'd used to wrap the smaller of the 2 kittens when they'd first brought them in. The little female who'd been shaking with fear. Sarah had meant to wash it, but had forgotten it in her bag over the weekend. Now she thanked whatever force had made her forgetful. Carefully, she pulled out the cloth and held it where the breeze could catch it. The effect on the bobcat was immediate and electric. The cat's head snapped up, her golden eyes locking onto Sarah with an intensity that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. But it wasn't aggression in those eyes. It was desperate hope. Sarah took a slow step backward toward the building. The Bobcat took a step forward. Sarah took another step back. The cat followed, maintaining about 15 feet of distance between them. It was like an ancient dance, predator and human, but with an understanding that transcended species, one mother recognizing another's anguish. As they moved across the parking lot, Sarah's mind raced. She was about to lead a wild bobcat into a building full of people. Every protocol, every safety regulation screamed against what she was doing. But she'd also seen enough separated wildlife families to know that mother bobcats could waste away searching for lost kittens. And orphaned kittens, even at 12 weeks, still needed their mother's teaching to survive in the wild. The main entrance loomed ahead, its glass doors reflecting the morning sun. Sarah could see Meredith, the young veterinary assistant, inside at the reception desk, absorbed in paperwork. Sarah pulled out her phone with her free hand and quickly typed a message to the staff group chat. "Do not panic. I'm bringing in the kitten's mother. Clear the hallway to quarantine room 3. This is controlled." She saw Meredith's head snap up as her phone buzzed, watched her read the message, then look up to see Sarah approaching with her unusual companion. To Meredith's credit, she didn't scream or make any sudden movements. Instead, she slowly stood and backed away from the desk, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe. Sarah pushed open the door with her hip, still holding the cloth where the bobcat could smell it. The automatic sensors kept the door open as the wildcat hesitated at the threshold. This was the critical moment. A wild bobcat entering a human building went against every instinct the animal had. Sarah could see the war playing out in the cat's body language, the desperate need to find her babies fighting against generations of survival instinct. "I know, Mama," Sarah whispered, her voice soft and steady. "I know it's scary, but they're here. Your babies are here." Whether it was the tone of her voice or another gust of wind carrying the kitten's scent from the cloth, something tipped the balance. The bobcat stepped through the doorway. The walk down the hallway felt like it lasted hours, though it couldn't have been more than 30 seconds. Sarah was acutely aware of every sound, the hum of the fluorescent lights, the distant chirp of songbirds in the recovery room, the soft pad of the bobcat's paws on the linoleum floor. She could see faces appearing in doorways. Dr. Robert Thompson, the center's veterinarian, Martha from the Raptor program, young Jake, the maintenance supervisor, all frozen in disbelief at the surreal procession. The door to quarantine room 3 was just ahead. Sarah could hear them now, the distinctive mewing of the kittens who must have caught their mother's scent. The bobcat's ears pitched forward, and she let out an answering chirp, louder this time, urgent. Sarah's hand trembled slightly as she reached for the door handle. This was it. Either she was about to witness something beautiful, or she was about to have a very frightened, very defensive wild predator loose in an enclosed space. She turned the handle and pushed the door open. What happened next would be burned into the memory of everyone who witnessed it, either in person or later on the security footage that would be watched and rewatched dozens of times in the days to come. The 2 kittens, who had been pressed against the far wall of their enclosure, suddenly scrambled forward, their little voices rising in a crescendo of cries that sounded almost like human babies. The mother bobcat let out a sound Sarah had never heard before, something between a purr and a whimper, and bounded forward. The reunion was not the graceful, dignified affair one might expect from such elegant creatures. It was messy and desperate and absolutely beautiful. The mother bobcat practically collapsed as her kittens barreled into her, their little bodies climbing over each other to press against her, to nurse even though they were nearly weaned, to reassure themselves that she was real. The mother's rough tongue worked overtime, grooming both kittens simultaneously, occasionally pausing to sniff them all over as if checking for injuries. Sarah found herself wiping tears from her cheeks, and she wasn't alone. Dr. Thompson had appeared in the doorway, and the gruff 68-year-old veterinarian who'd seen everything in his 40-year career was suspiciously red-eyed. Meredith was openly crying, her phone out recording the moment. Even Jake, barely 22 and usually more interested in fixing generators than animal behavior, stood transfixed. "Well," Dr. Thompson said, his voice gruff with emotion, "I suppose we know what we need to do." Sarah nodded. There was only one right thing to do, and everyone in that room knew it. The rest of the morning became a masterclass in controlled chaos. While the Bobcat family reunited in the quarantine room, the staff scrambled to prepare for an immediate release. Dr. Thompson performed quick health checks on all three cats. The mother was thin but healthy, stressed but uninjured. The kittens were thriving. Martha coordinated with the state wildlife department, filling out the necessary paperwork for an early release. Jake and his crew prepared the large transport carrier, lining it with fresh bedding and the flannel cloth that had brought them all together. The question of where to release them sparked a brief debate. The storage shed where the kittens had been found was near the Forest Service Road, about 2 miles up the mountain from the center. Sarah remembered the security footage showing the kittens entering from the north side, which meant they'd likely come down from the ridge above, prime bobcat territory with plenty of deer, rabbits, and water sources. "That's probably where Mama was when they wandered off," Dr. Thompson mused, studying the topographical map spread across his desk. Kittens that age are starting to explore on their own, but they don't usually go far. Something must have spooked them or confused them. Maybe that thunderstorm we had Thursday night. By noon, they were ready. Loading the reunited family into the carrier proved easier than expected. The mother, exhausted from 3 days of searching, seemed to understand they weren't a threat. She remained calm as long as she could see and smell her kittens. The convoy that headed up the mountain was larger than strictly necessary. Sarah drove the transport van with Doc Thompson beside her. Meredith followed in another vehicle with Martha and 2 volunteers. Even Jake tagged along, having declared he needed to check on that damaged fence section up by the ridge with suspicious timing. They chose a release spot near a natural spring where game trails converged and the forest provided good cover. The afternoon sun slanted through the pines, creating a dappled pattern on the forest floor. Sarah parked the van, and everyone gave them space as she and Dr. Thompson positioned the carrier door toward the forest. "You want to do the honors?" Dr. Thompson asked. Sarah nodded, her throat tight with emotion. She knelt beside the carrier and slowly lifted the door. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the mother bobcat emerged, her movements cautious but not panicked. She took a few steps, then turned back, chirping softly. The 2 kittens tumbled out after her, staying close to her legs. The mother cat paused at the edge of the clearing and looked back. Her golden eyes met Sarah's, and for just a moment, Sarah could have sworn she saw something there. Not exactly gratitude. Wild animals didn't think that way, but perhaps an acknowledgement. Then the bobcat turned and melted into the forest, her kittens bouncing along behind her, their spotted coats quickly becoming invisible among the shadows and undergrowth. The group stood in silence for a long moment after the cats disappeared. Finally, Meredith spoke, her voice soft with wonder. "Do you think they'll be okay?" Dr. Thompson, ever the pragmatist, nodded. The mother's hunting skills are intact. The kittens are healthy and the right age to learn. They've got as good a chance as any wild family. As they packed up the carrier and prepared to head back down the mountain, Sarah took one last look at the forest where the Bobcat family had vanished. The wind rustled through the pines, carrying the scent of autumn and wild places. Somewhere out there, a mother was teaching her kittens to hunt, to climb, to survive. The natural order had been restored. Back at the center, word of the morning's events had spread. The security footage was already being edited into a video that would eventually go viral, raising awareness about wildlife rehabilitation and the importance of keeping wild families together. But for Sarah, the impact was more personal. That night, as she sat on her cabin porch watching the sun set over the mountains, she thought about the look in that mother bobcat's eyes, the fierce, unbreakable determination to find her young. It reminded her why she'd devoted her life to this work. Not for the viral videos or the heartwarming stories, though those helped raise support for the center, but for moments like these, when human compassion and understanding could make a small difference in the vast, complex tapestry of the wild. The next morning, Sarah arrived at work at her usual time. The parking lot was quiet, the dumpster area empty except for a few bold ravens picking at something invisible. But as she walked toward the building, she noticed tracks in the soft earth near the forest edge. The distinctive round prints of a bobcat, two sets of smaller prints following behind. They were moving north, up the mountain toward home. Sarah smiled and headed inside to start another day, carrying with her the memory of golden eyes and the sound of kittens crying for their mother, and the knowledge that sometimes, just sometimes, everything works out exactly as it should. The Mountain View Wildlife Rehabilitation Center would go on to help hundreds more animals in the years to come. But the story of the bobcat who walked into their building to reclaim her kittens would become legend, told and retold to new volunteers, shared at wildlife conferences, and whispered about in the break room whenever someone needed reminding that their work mattered. And sometimes, on quiet mornings when the mist hung low over the mountains, Sarah would see bobcat tracks near the center and wonder if it was the same family, thriving in their mountain territory, wild and free as they were meant to be. She never knew for certain, but she chose to believe it was true. Because in wildlife rehabilitation, as in life, sometimes faith and hope are just as important as facts and protocols. The bobcat mother had taught them all something that day, that the bonds between parent and child transcend species, that trust can bloom in the most unlikely moments, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is follow your instincts, even when they lead you straight through the front door of a human building.